Happy Wednesday, everybody. My name's Aaron. I'm the co-founder, managing director here at BWG Connect, Giant Networking Group. Try to do as many of these networking sessions as we can a year. We want them to be as educational and informational as possible. As you have any questions along the way, drop them in the Q&A and we'll get them answered pretty much as real time as we possibly can. If you're in a major city, let us know. We'd love to let you in on some of the dinners that we're doing across the country. We'll do 80 to 90, it looks like, this year. Other things, recaps of all of these conversations do take place in a LinkedIn newsletter. So I encourage you to just, if you go to my profile, you can see it. You can just click on it and you'll get a recap of this, the link to the full video, a little snippet, key takeaways, all that fun stuff. So I encourage you to go out there and just subscribe to that so you can stay on top of stuff. I spend most of my time just talking to brands. What are you most interested in? What should we cover next? And I don't think anybody is surprised. AI content is at the top of it. How do I create it? Am I showing up in the LLMs? Hence the name of this one, Can AI Content Rank? The short-term opportunity and the long-term risk. For those of you who've been part of the network for a while, you know Jordan, longtime friend, just an absolute awesome resource for a ton of brands. Just love how much he gives to the network. And he's an all-around expert in this space. And so obviously we reached out to Jordan and said, hey, Jordan, let's do something. Can you come help educate the community? And he said, yes. So Jordan, welcome back. I'll kick it over to you. If you want to do a quick recap of yourself and Coalition and all the stuff you guys are doing, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. Jordan Brannon, president and co-founder with my brother of Coalition Technologies. We're one of the largest privately held agencies, I think, in the United States. I'm very focused on e-commerce, which is also a little bit of a unique specialization for an agency of our size. We have grown up in SEO and e-commerce, and paid search and e-commerce has sort of been our starting point even before there was an agency. And those continue to be pretty near and dear to our heart these days. Partially, I've said this, I think, in probably one of these calls before. It's a really interesting time because of AI, and AI is sort of doing what Google did 20 years ago. It's trying to mature rapidly and figure out how to deal with spam and with legitimate content and decide what it wants to cite and link and rank and where it wants to throw ads. So just that really keeps me interested, and that's leading to a lot of testing, and a lot of what we're talking about today will come from Coalition's. We have about 300 active clients and about 800 different accounts where we help maintain analytics and things like that for them. And so I have a pretty good data set to look at and reference as we go through the call.
Yeah, awesome. So let's jump in with this AI content piece. So everybody's being asked all over the place to update their content. With that, how do we do it? A lot of people are turning to AI to create the content that needs to be put out there to rank.
Yeah.
Sounds kind of circular to me, but anyways, I'll just start off with this question. Your opinion, is AI content good for ranking or not? I'm guessing it's not a simple answer, but
yeah, I got an hour ahead of me to try to answer that question. So there's got to be some definitions around AI content. If we're going with sort of AI content, meaning large volume of copy straight out of ChatGPT or your preferred model, our answer is a definite no. We've done a fair bit of testing. We've had a couple years now to look at this, and it can rank for a while. It can even produce a really nice looking SEO chart for a few minutes or months, which again, as an SEO agency, there's some commercial reasons that you could want to do that, but they often really don't benefit our clients long term. And since we tend to have a longer relationship with our clients than a lot of SEO agencies, that's more the focus. If you are using AI strategically and carefully and a little bit more as a scalpel, and you really feel like scalpel is the right way to describe how you're using AI, then I might say that's possibly a place where we would look at it. So if it's helpful in team research, if it's helpful in organizing your content, if it's helpful in analyzing data you already have, it's helpful in improving your original material. All of those things can be really useful. But again, one of the favorite things I like to say about it is the value has to come from someplace other than the AI model itself. If your AI strategy is really not predicated on value going into the model, then you're probably in a spot where AI is going to be problematic for you. And again, I think there's sort of an emerging awareness for this in the SEO industry, because I think Google is starting to be a little more forthright, I think, with how it's handling AI content.
Yeah, I mean, if Google's out there saying it's not, categorically against AI generated content, I'd love to hear your position on that. You guys we've had some very interesting conversations in the past around how Google looks at stuff versus and what they say versus what you say about it.
hmm Yeah, and I will say this, like Google is not a trustworthy representative of Google's own strategies. That's really become obvious in the last couple of years as they've been forced to disclose more through the DOJ and through some different lawsuits in different regions. So I mean, like, but what's really weird to me, and this is again like where there's a bit of a psychological problem in the SEO space, is there are some SEOs who were always ride or die with what Google says, and they feel like that's white hat. Like they'll feel like this is the right way to do SEO. And they frankly have sort of fallen into this trap of being too beholden to Google and not beholden to their customers enough. Because a lot of what Google puts out there has some incentive or advantage to Google, and sometimes it actually really is good for your SEO campaign. With us, when Google came out first and said, like, we're not against AI content, I was a bit flabbergasted, actually, because it was like, come on, Google, like this type of AI content is just going to fill up your indexes. It's going to really spam, and you're going to have to deal with that spam. Like it's going to get so much more expensive to do what you already do. But as we started to look at Google's problem here is that they are a prolific producer of AI content, right? So if you come out and you say AI content is bad, it's unreliable, it's not original, well, then what the heck are you doing posting AI content to the top of every search results page? Why are you producing one of the largest AI, content generating models in Gemini? Why are you pushing us towards AI mode? There's a problem there. The other problem with it is, I think, investor related, where investors want their big tech companies to be all about AI. But Google investors also want them to sort of say that they've got things under control in terms of the core search product and search ads. So acknowledging that AI content is a growing problem starts to call into question their core money-making business while they're also trying to be known as an AI company. And we've, again, like this was early when Google was sort of patently saying, like, we're not against AI content. We've really seen that shift a little bit, and the tone has gotten a little more cool towards AI generated content. And over time, I think their actual algorithms and what's happening, it's starting to make it seem like, Google is not as technology neutral as it says it is. Even if they're saying the main problem is about unoriginal, low value pages built to manipulate rankings. And they don't care if it's by humans or by AI. The reality is, I think that there's something a little bit more underpinning Google's approach to AI, which could create a little bit more of a liability, especially if you're planning on publishing 10,000 pages with it.
So is the issue is scale then?
Yeah, I mean, scale is an accelerant, and I think it's an accelerant issue for Google. Again, Google is combating a massive amount of spam that it hasn't had to face before, and a lot of that is, unoriginal. It's reciting what was already ranking at the top. If you think about how ChatGPT generates some of these articles, when you're prompting it to base something off of a recent event, it's just recycling what's most recent, and a lot of that's already being generated with AI. So I think scale is certainly one of the ways that Google is identifying spam more quickly, and it's easier for Google to actually say this is AI spam. I think at a deeper level, there are problems, again, of just the theory of replaceability. And I think this will start to emerge more as we start to see more AI summaries as the norm in search results. But if I can go to 5 different models, 5 different LLMs, and get 5 slightly different versions of the same public information, your content is really unoriginal, and you then have to force Google to consider your content through other means. You don't have any real reason to exist in that space. And you can, again, maybe try and make that forcing happen on a page-by-page basis. But I do think search engines and other platforms are starting to get to the point where it's no longer just about scale. There's an incentive for them to identify a fingerprint that's present on any page and then start to discount that content based on, again, this pattern or fingerprint. And if they see it often enough on a website, start to take broader action, and again, treat that particular website or publishing system as being abusive.
Yeah, so quick reminder, others, you have questions, drop in the Q&A. We'll get to them real time. But I'm just going through. So at the end of the day, these are the LLMs that are out there. They call them like the prediction engines, right? They're harvesting. And so whether it's Chat or Claude or whatever, they're going to harvest the same data. So they should give you pretty much a similar response. So then the uniqueness comes into play. And when you say the content, is not truly unique in conversations that we have, like, are you saying like AI isn't creating original sentences? Like, because that's what it is at the end of the day. It's not a thought, it's a sentence. It's yanked out information, consolidated, and then regurgitated back out, maybe in a different format.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a couple things to pick apart there. One is, depending on the nature of the prompt, you can get pretty different outputs from different models. The sort of general right for me on a pretty well-known, well-established old topic, you're likely to see just in the corpus of training something more similar between each of the models. If you use one more often than others, you might see more personalization infused into your particular response. If you don't use Claude very regularly, your ChatGPT response might feel a little more distinctive and different, and that's, again, probably has more to do with personalization. And then again, like once you start to push into something that's in the moment, it's looking at current events, current data, crawling current resources, there's a chance that you're going to see more differentiation because the big LLMs tend to do that a little bit differently in terms of how they respond. And again, even if you're a paid user, you can start to get some different things. But kind of back to the original question, I think original wording and original value are kind of different things. Again, models at their heart, when we're talking about text, creation and even image creation, arguably, and video creation and even code creation, they're ultimately just kind of putting in the next best thing to achieve whatever the specific output was asked for. And so, again, maybe it's not the exact sequence that's shown up before, so maybe it's unique in that way. But the reality is very few, if none of these, are actually able to execute in sort of a typical use, execute and create some sort of new information, new facts, new observations, new tests, new credible opinions, new answers. Again, you can have models that are working in research in a genuine fashion and running millions of experiments. It's different from what we're talking about today. So I'll kind of give that caveat if someone is in here is an AI purist and wants to throw rocks at me and say they just solved this novel math equation that humans haven't been able to figure out. Okay, fine. But that's not what we're doing most of the time. And so I think for search engines, the big question is, what does this particular page know or demonstrate or answer that maybe doesn't already exist at scale on the web? And if the answer really is nothing, then I think that content itself is vulnerable. And again, AI content tends to produce that. So by and large, it's maybe more vulnerable. I think that tells you, again, why Google might have, and others, not just Google, we're kind of talking about rankings, so Google will come up often, but AI and Google and other platforms are going to have an incentive to identify AI content quickly and then also at scale.
Yeah, I want to get into that really quickly around, because we've chatted in the past around, Google, can they fingerprint AI? And then, I mean, and Ken calls it out here. Ken, thanks for dropping the question. And others, you have questions, drop in the Q&A. Says, thanks for the discussion. Thoughts on news that dropped yesterday about Anthropic watermarking AI developed content?
Yeah. So this is I'll give a quick news summary there. So basically, EU has come out, and EU tends to move faster than US law. And so it tends to have, it's interesting because EU has a big enough market where EU action can have enforcement realities for US big companies. And so EU came out yesterday and said that specifically Anthropic in this particular instance has to start to produce or weave in and integrate essentially a fingerprint to content it produces. And it's not just text content, although that's what a lot of SEOs are focusing on. But it basically, if Anthropic or Claude produces something, the EU wants there to be a system by which that's identifiable. And the goal is mainly about deep fakes and misinformation. So if someone's out there posting about their least favorite politician and generating some sort of AI slop about them, then they want a system by which a big tech company or some other regulator can identify that this was produced with AI. Now, there's a few things that and I actually just did this in our newsletter today. It's probably rolling while we're in this call, that I think are interesting about that. First is the technology to fingerprint already existed. So this is actually, so the ruling came out, and then very quickly Anthropic said, well, here it is. Like it's not like this was net new technology or solutions that had to be invented. Again, I think most big AI companies and most big social companies and most big tech companies already have been working to fingerprint not only their own models, but also fingerprint other models that are out there, partially because they want to know who's stealing or trying to discover some of their weighting and their underlying data that they're using to train these models. And so there's a ton of value in this fingerprinting exercise just beyond this one EU ruling. The technology already exists. Google's been pushing something called SynthID to do the same. But I do think like the caveat, one of the caveats we touch on is that because Anthropic specifically is going to be publishing its own fingerprinting, of course, companies are going to use that fingerprint to identify Claude-generated content. It's like a free gimme. I expect that ruling to apply then to Google and Gemini and ChatGPT and others. So if you think like, well, I'll stop using Claude to generate my SEO content and I'll be safe, it's going to apply to everybody. And so I think the reality is that this type of fingerprinting will then be shared across different tech companies for different reasons than just deepfakes. And I think this will start to surface what's already happening behind the scenes in terms of SEO and filtering out AI content. So all of that to sum up, be more cautious with just straight line copy paste AI content, especially if you want it to have any sort of organic value. Expect to see your content flagged as AI generated increasingly if you are not careful in editing. That might happen not only in like a Facebook window or a Facebook ad or an Amazon experience, but it could also just start happening because of your browser. Chrome is pretty integrated for AI. You could have Chrome inserting some sort of notice in your address bar that says likely AI generated. And you might see that increasingly happen. And so I do think more human intervention is necessary. Anthropic specifically calls out that editing to their images, screenshots of their images, intermediation on text content can actually sort of disturb the fingerprint or the watermark. And so I think, again, those should already hopefully be a part of your practice. But I think, again, it's somewhat telling that, A, this is already available, B, Anthropic had no problem publishing it, and I think C, the big takeaway is like expect every big tech company to use these types of fingerprints to sort of identify what's human and what's not.
When you say that, like, so Anthropic's doing it on its own, are you saying then like Google's actually going out and identifying it and then fingerprinting it on their own to then reflect?
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, like this is funny. This always gets me in trouble in the Reddit SEO community, which is sort of kind of moderated by people who are a little more pro AI content, but they're kind of backtracking now, which is fun to see. I love winning in the end. I took my down votes. Now I get to stand by what I said a few years ago. But absolutely, I mean, it's surprisingly easy to identify AI content when you have a sample at the scale that Google does, especially broken out by topic. And so I think that's one thing a lot of people assume. It's very difficult to identify AI content. We have about 20,000 applicants per month for our different openings because we hire globally and we're well known for remote work. And it's been really easy for us to start to break down which particular AI platform and model is driving someone's applicant response, even though we really frequently remind people not to use AI. And we've actually been able to sort of prove this out. But we're working off of a small sample size compared to Google. And so, and again, I'll point back, there's a commercial value for Google and other LLMs, and Google maybe has more incentive. One is you can protect your model. Like if I know what my model produces on average, and I start to see a Chinese model producing the same thing, an open source model producing the same thing, I can tell that someone is playing with their model to try to match it to mine. And that means there's probably some sort of large scale scraping that's happening, some sort of effort. Maybe there's some industrial espionage happening. We know this is sort of a big deal between nation states. And then also just again, like Google needs to protect the algorithm, and Google doesn't want AI overuse in AI mode and Gemini just to become AI talking about AI. Like we could be years deep in AI, repetition. And as AI overview specifically starts to become more of a narrow topic addressing thing instead of 10 blue links, I would expect to see like the value of human insight and popular human insight to be really significant to Google. And so again, scraping out AI content as rapidly as possible, I think important.
Yeah. Samantha drops a question in here, then Denise will get to yours. How will the watermark be implemented? I can assume that for images, the watermark will be embedded in the metadata field. But what about text?
Yeah. There's metadata is, I think, sort of one of the big call outs for images. There's also been talk about, and actually your printers do this, which was sort of a novel comparison, but your printer actually can embed inside of like color density and pixel density when it's printing images, which printer it was printed on. It's actually been around for a long time. I kind of use that as a reference. And so I expect that there will be some of that that's happening even beyond the metadata, and maybe makes it a little harder for you to just to sort of like change the metadata, which you can do in Photoshop. In text, the way that Anthropic proposed basically is something like a word choice, a word patterning. It could be a mix of word choice and length of sentences, the frequency of certain words, plus the length of sentences, plus the length of paragraph, plus these different specific tells and across a document might make it more apparent. They called out shorter text would be harder to fingerprint. And I think, again, you take like your old favorite crime drama, that old, like I got part of the finger on the doorknob and now I have to like try to find the other half of it. That's part of my detective mystery. I think short text like that, again, it potentially is, a way of breaking that up or editing it. So, but yes, Anthropic basically is proposing something embedded in the text. So editing it, disturbing that pattern in some way potentially helps you avoid that. Google, I will note, like this fingerprinting exercise, Google won't have the same exact insight until Anthropic gives it to them as to exactly what that fingerprint is. And so it's going to come up with its own pattern. And so even if your fingerprint isn't complete, if Google thinks it's representative of Claude or of ChatGPT, it's potentially still something that would actually begin to get filtered out.
Awesome. I skipped over this question. So super insightful discussion. Thank you. What are your thoughts for a large corporate retailer that might be considering a tool that automatically identifies your gap areas and generates content, i.e. blogs, FAQs for you, promising to increase your AI LLM visibility?
Again, go back to that early statement. If it's not producing original value, be really skeptical of the long-term value that it's going to produce. There are a lot of tools out there. We test a lot of these. We pay for some of these. We work with clients who are paying for some of them directly. And I have yet to see one where I've really been like impressed in the long term with what they're producing. We tend to have the best luck ourselves with kind of narrowly focused GPTs, or even a mix of AI tools doing very specific things. Identifying a gap, maybe generating some parts of content is potentially valuable. Again, you have to look at what's the original value going in before you do that. And we've tried to build systems or find tools that help us grab client original value and then parse that out into maybe AI generated content. And even then, one of the strategies that we have, and I would probably touch on this as we go a little bit further into the call, is we actually look at human insertion afterwards. And so instead of just simply trying to read the AI content and say, like, is it good? Does it sound like an AI or not? We actually mandate human content being inserted into that content, and then refining the AI generation to blend that in more. And we find that really helps us in the longevity of the content we're producing in terms of how it ranks, without necessarily becoming a significant burden when we're trying to cover thousands of pages at once.
Awesome. Denise, now to your question. Others, you have questions, drop in the Q&A. Are there any tips which online retailers can heed to ultimately use AI-generated Claude SEO content to help supplement pages on our site, to make it our own with a human touch at scale, so to not get tagged as AI-driven?
Yeah. One is I'd really avoid one-shots. And by one-shot, I mean like, hey, I have a women's tennis racket I'm trying to sell. My wife and I were just shopping for one of those. We've been doing family tennis over the summer. And so instead of saying generate page content for e-commerce product page for a premium women's tennis racket brand, and here's the brand name. Like that sort of one shot is going to be a train wreck all the time for AI generated content. It's going to be very formulaic. Again, that fingerprinting and patterning is likely to show up. Again, we've had more success with breaking out our PDPs and our collection type content pages into not only different AI models, but also just different prompts or projects or custom GPTs, or in our case, we do a lot of this through API. But again, if you're not necessarily doing all of that, like look at segmenting that. And again, provide an underlying source that allows you to push in original value that comes from your own content, your own data, and that again in these smaller bite-sized elements tends to create less AI-isms. And then again, that final touch is insert some human commentary. Reviews can be great if you have them. Actual human question and answer type sections, adding them to your FAQs plus a human answer. All of those human insertion abilities seem like they really help us in terms of longevity of content and how it ranks.
Awesome. Keep dropping questions in. We'll get them answered. So you were talking a little bit about Google's ability to start flagging all of this stuff. It begs a couple questions. Like, I'd love examples of how they're doing it so people can pick it apart. And then I also have questions if you have ideas. How does Google, how do they prove it was written by AI? Like, those are a couple things that I'd love to dig a little bit deeper on, right? And yeah. Anyways, I'll kind of throw those two out there.
Yeah, maybe answer the second part of that first. Everybody wants Google to have to prove something. Like a lot of SEO engagement I've had with Redditors is like, they can't conclusively do this. They can't with 100% certainty say this. Okay. I mean, like, sure, I'm fine with that. And like anybody who's been in SEO long enough knows that Google makes mistakes. You might have been, some of the marketers here might have worked at a website or with a brand that did everything right. And then all of a sudden, algorithmically, after an update, suddenly you start to see your rankings fall. Well, was that fair? Did Google do the right thing? Were they 100% certain? No. Did they care? No. Ultimately, Google is pursuing its own commercial interests here. It's after what it thinks is best for itself, and it's trying to do that at an enormous scale. I mean, like an unfathomable scale. And so this expectation that Google needs to sort of prove itself 100% of the time is actually one of the most dangerous assumptions you can make in SEO. And I will also just caveat, like, part of the risk is, and you see this happen all the time with good writers who are classically trained and maybe work with a publisher, they often get accused of writing AI-generated content because their sentence structure and their word choice and their use of M dashes looks like AI to the common user. You can be fully human written and still get pinged as like, oh, maybe they're using AI, like we'll devalue the content here. And so I would just sort of say, like, this idea that we need Google to 100% prove that something is AI content is really dangerous. And the idea that there's a certain threshold by which you can assume that you're safe by, like, your zero GPT is saying like, oh, I'm 20% human or 20% AI, like that's okay. Just, you really have to be paying close attention to what's happening in Search Console and analytics, and really deciding, like, is there something patterning out here where I feel like my content's being devalued and it's not being properly recognized? Is AI a part of that story? In terms of, again, how it's doing that, one of them is, I think, all of the AI companies have accused each other of essentially scraping activities. Like, can I drop in, what is BWG Connect into every single paid and free ChatGPT model? And then if I do that signed in, not signed in, if I do that from a number of accounts, if I do that via the API, can I actually start to see specific words and terminology showing up that are pretty distinct to ChatGPT, that aren't present in Claude, that aren't present in Gemini, and maybe aren't present in just sort of the web at large, which again, Google's uniquely positioned to do? Can I start to say that there's a pattern here in the writing that's common across most textual topics without prompting to correct it? ChatGPT is going to write in a similar fashion. Claude's going to write in a similar fashion, similar readability levels, similar sentence length, similar paragraph length, bullets, how it handles titles and section headings. All of these things are common. And so Google's at a really great spot to say, like, here's the broad overlay. This looks like Claude. Specifically on this topic, this looks like Claude. Therefore, I assume Claude. And now, again, that may not result in a penalty, but it could potentially mean that your content starts to see the content itself. You're working hard to produce for SEO, maybe isn't as valuable.
So, what, we still have you, Jordan?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, cool.
Yep.
It looks like you're frozen my screen here. I was reading this next question that comes in from Andrew.
Yeah,
what about
probably
using
too.
LLMs for translation? If the input content was all human written in English, what are the risks of things to watch out for when using AI translation tools?
Here's a really interesting experiment we're doing is your content, and this is actually specific to AI rankings, what we think is happening for a lot of these models, especially free ones, is a lot of them are actually translating your content back to English to decide if you should rank. So there's actually sort of an extra step inside of a lot of these models where, especially because some of them are restricted in other countries and internationally, we actually don't think they're reading your or taking value from your translated content. We actually think they're taking value from how your content translates into English, and then they're making a determination and then going, it's essentially ranking it to a particular foreign language audience. So that's just practically, it's sort of an interesting thing in terms of sort of an exercise. Again, we actually think that's happening, and so we actually have some comment on that. Google is a bit different because Google is quite a bit more technically adept at handling multi-language, multi-region sites compared to a typical LLM. So ChatGPT or Claude is less interested in that and sort of the technical structure of a website that's both in English and in French. So I would say, like, there's, for us with Google, it's probably actually more of a technical exercise. And I would probably focus more on how you're tagging and structuring your site and avoiding sort of duplicate content. And again, with Google, we're a little bit more jury's out, but we still think they actually lean on, for the AI portion of Google Gemini and AI mode, we think they still lean on your English version of your site. So the translation being there is a bit of a secondary bonus, mainly for consumer. And again, using it as part of building out a truly translated website, I'd be more okay with today.
Awesome. Others drop questions and we'll get to them. So you've used terms like devaluation and penalty differently, and I think they're looking at those two things, right? They don't want to be penalized. They don't want to be devaluated. Those are two different things. I'd love you to kind of pick those two things apart.
Yeah.
And then how do we avoid them?
Yeah, this is partially the problem with this terminology is it's just not used cleanly inside of SEO practice. And some of you have worked with SEOs, maybe some of you are SEOs, and we can get a little sloppy with how we handle the terms and describe what's happening. When you're describing to like maybe a novice person who's not super engaged in SEO, slapping the phrase penalty on everything when you see a big ranking drop on a site or across a group of pages, it just sort of makes sense. And we may mean penalized instead of a penalty, and devaluing in some ways is maybe more helpful as a distinctive term. So maybe a simple way is to say, like, you're trying to reach a high score in a game. And to do that, you have to successfully complete 10 different tasks. And anybody who completes all 10 tasks well is always going to have a better opportunity at scoring the high score. If you can only do 7 of them, you can still do pretty well, but you're likely coming up short if you're bad in 3 areas. Content devaluation just basically means that your content isn't adding value. It's almost like those 3 levels or 3 things that you didn't do well in the game. So you're just not going to necessarily pick up the total value you have available to you because your content is problematic for some reason. So there's lots of rules in SEO about how often to use your keywords and anchor text links and what's the right readability level and right page length and how do you structure your page. All of those things are like kind of relevant to how do you make your content structurally valuable to Google for ranking, or maybe take advantage of the opportunity you have there. And one of the things we've seen happen is we think that Google just will devalue some AI content, sometimes single page and sometimes a whole site. And that's where we start to get into penalty conversations because of use of AI. We think like if Google really thinks you're using AI, it doesn't think you're adding anything new, unique to the conversation. You then are left to try and win your ranking through other things. Is my page popular, my brand popular on social media? Is this page widely linked to? Is there a lot of user signal coming to Google about this particular URL that indicates that it should rank? So you can still rank with AI content, but the question is that AI content itself actually just getting in the way of, is it essentially a score of 0 in one category, so it's not actually adding in the way that you think it would? And would humanizing it or having written human content to support it actually have done better? And that's dangerous because I think that's a harder test to run in SEO. And so many people are just throwing this SEO content out that's AI generated, and they're expecting it to do what they want SEO to produce, which is better rankings. And all of a sudden they're seeing not quite the outcome they're looking for. There's a good chance you've got devalued content. Now, penalty itself is actually, either a manual action. You often will see these show up in Google Search Console, or it can be automated. They basically say that you have violated Google's webmaster policies in such a way we feel it's overt. And usually that's going to be accompanied by almost a complete, in typical practice day, it's almost, an entire domain or a section of a domain will be essentially de-indexed. It's not present in any Google search results. And in some cases with AI content, we've seen like where you can't even get a homepage to rank for its own brand name because of these penalties. Now, sometimes you can correct them. But oftentimes that can take an extended period of time, and some of them may even require manual review from Google again, and that can take enormous amounts of time. And so you may have to even choose, like, is it commercially worthwhile for us to keep doing this, or should we try and start a new domain?
It's interesting. So SEO, right, for people who have been around for a long time, it is a longer term play.
Yeah.
And yet, I think what a lot of people have been seeing with this AI generated content, they put it in there, they can get this, it's a lower quality content, but it's short term, right? It's like dump it in there, and all of a sudden, we've had this, I think this conversation, maybe we even did a webinar on it, is SEO dead? And it was almost this idea when these came out, you could do this stuff, you could put it in there, and instead of usually the longer term buildup of SEO and the holding power, it was you could get this little blip. So
Yeah.
do you see people doing this to get that short term like blip?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a whole, and this is like again like where it's being in the SEO industry offers a different perspective than working with SEOs or doing doing SEO work yourself when you're a digital marketer. What we often see is like there is a massive subsection of the SEO industry that is not interested in long-term performance. A lot of this is sort of people who are pushing like get-rich courses, people who are doing affiliate schemes, people who are running different advertising-driven websites. They don't really care about health, and their main SEO practice is how do I get value as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible. And my regular cadence, if I'm in that space, is churn and burn. I will run up a new domain, bwgconnectai.com, and I'm going to get 3 months of affiliate content because I'm selling leads back to Aaron. Aaron doesn't totally know what I'm doing, but then 3 months in, Google throws me a penalty. Instead of trying to fix bwgconnectai.com, I'm going out and going bwgconnectais.com, and now I'm starting my whole cycle over again and trying to aim to produce a similar result as quickly as possible, regardless of what happens to the domain. Part of our perspective that's different is because we work with so many e-commerce brands, especially ones that are meaningfully established. We're not working with a lot of like the fly-by-night drop ship, like get-rich-quick sort of folks. They're interested in preserving and growing a business that's 10 years old, and they already have decent organic SEO on their own based on just brand success. And the idea that we would do anything to sort of burn their domain is unthinkable. It's unthinkable to us. It's unthinkable to them. But there's also sort of this lack of awareness that this whole industry exists out there that's like that. The other piece is that a lot of people in the SEO industry just are maybe not retaining very well because they don't practice. They don't actually understand what the practice of SEO should look like for an e-commerce website. And so they're mainly interested in keeping you 3 months. If they can do 5 months, it's a miracle. If it's 6 months, it's awesome. And so they're just sort of looking for that next little shot in the arm to sort of keep you on board. And there's not a very sustainable strategy. So yeah, there's some SEO pieces to this that are certainly out there. I think you really have to be thinking like if you're working with an SEO and it does seem like it's just so much happening so fast. And again, there's not original value that you can point to. That they seem to be just sort of on their own producing a massive amount of content. They're not drawing from your data, drawing from your product catalog, doing research. That there's a question about how much original value they have. Some of you also, maybe as a digital marketer, I'm going to offer a little corrective moment. You refuse to provide original value to your SEO company. We've been on the receiving end of that, where someone just like, you do it, you do SEO. Like, I'm not going to help you at all. We're not going to provide anything that would offer original value. You just got to figure that out on your own. You can get in the way of your own success and the opportunity to scale your campaigns faster in a way that would be more helpful. Because again, if you give your SEO insights into returns, causes of returns, purchase volume of certain products, what's trending, what's popular, what's doing well in social, what's doing well in your email channel. If you're sharing that sort of insight and data with them, those things can be really helpful. And again, putting more original value in. So that's my SEO rant over. I'm not even sure if I answered the original question, Aaron. So if you need more from me, let me know.
No, I mean, I think that was it. There are a lot of everybody's looking at this content, and there's a lot of that buzz. I mean, part of the reason we had this was a lot of people are saying, "Hey, I've tried it, I've used it, I saw the bump, and now it's like gone.
Mm-hmm.
What happened?" And it seems like that always happened over and over again.
Yep.
But I'm not saying I'm a scientist at heart, right? Like trial and error, see if it works. But then I also read the data for what it is. In my mind, when I see that happen over and over again, it just takes me back to earlier where the question like, can Google really do this? Can they really
Yeah.
can they see
Again,
it in the first
actually,
place? Like I
yeah,
believe
the
yes.
fingerprinting can absolutely happen. I think it absolutely can, and I do again. Like I have almost 100% certainty that AI content that Google feels as AI content gets devalued. And so the real question is, can you supplement that with enough human value or create enough value for that page elsewhere that it is successful? I actually think that's actually a really important, maybe strategic thought for people here. Can you actually support the content that you're producing in other ways in SEO? So many people just think of content as being the only thing that matters for SEO. And so you could produce 10,000 pages of product detail content with the aim of SEO in mind, but you're never building links. It's never going on your social feed. It's never going to be clicked on. It's never going to be promoted anywhere. Okay, go back to the original analogy of you have to do 10 things well to get the high score. You're just asking AI content to score high enough that you can make up for 9 other things that you're never going to do. So that can be a strategically helpful decision. Okay, yeah, sure. What's the value of actually producing 10,000 pages on this particular topic? And if I'm not going to do anything else for it, probably nothing. It might be wise for me to actually look at okay, strategically, should I pivot to something where it's either it is so low competition that content only can do the trick, or emphasize places where I feel like I can support this in some other way.
Yeah, with that content, that short term, I'd say low quality AI, quick release content, they do see a bump though. If
Sometimes,
Google
yeah.
can see it, why does Google give those pages
Yeah.
visibility in the first place?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple things that we think are in play. One, and again, this varies by LLM and varies by search engine, so I'll paint with a broad brush. But recency does matter. So something that is new, broadly in the LLM space, is viewed as being more valuable as something that's old. We have 13 weeks is sort of our refresh target for key pages in ChatGPT. So if you work with us and we see ChatGPT as a meaningful opportunity for you, or you want ChatGPT to be more meaningful for you, every 13 weeks or so, we're going to try and update some key pages of your site, because in our testing, past that, you just aren't being cited or listed as a link or being included in any kind of ranking pack. So recency does matter. We think Google has something like that where it is testing new things inside of search results that are relatively static. This is why sometimes you'll see new competitors jump to the top of a ranking despite not having the links, despite not having these things. But what we find is that Google is also looking at like, what is the click-through rate? What is the engagement? Is there brand searches for this to support this particular domain being popular? And so those, again, that's sort of like blow up the balloon and then let it go. And then it's just going to go around the room for a little while and then eventually the air is out. And so there's nothing else to reinforce that it can happen. So a lot of AI content has that sort of practice. It's new, it's fresh. It seems to sort of mark a lot of the technical things. But again, not clicked on, not deemed uniquely valuable, not supported in other ways. And again, if the AI fingerprinting happens, which again I think does actually take some time, especially as it's produced by new models, you can see that sort of balloon limp on the floor within a couple of months.
Yeah, so if I already have a strong domain as a whole, like, is there grace given? Like, does this mean I can use AI content a little bit, not as much as other people? Is it safe? Like,
Yeah.
can I capitalize on the strength of my current domain and the ease of using AI to get more content out there? Is, is that a
Yeah,
possibility?
I think it actually, a strong domain in some ways masks the problem. So again, if you go back to like this idea that you have 10 criteria that help you rank or 10 areas you want to score highly and to help you rank, strong domain certainly matters. A popular brand certainly matters. And so what a lot of, companies make the mistake of doing is they sort of get into this mindset of like, I'm ranking, therefore the content is working. Well, actually, no, the content could be doing nothing at all. And your strength as a brand or strength as a domain is actually masking the success of this particular page. And again, like you potentially could be doing it quite a bit better than what you are, or you may be just sort of waiting for some sort of algorithmic kick in the butt that comes with the next core update or a spam update from Google. And so right now it looks lovely, but then you keep adding, another 1,000 pages, another 1,000 pages, and then like usually we get kind of hot and heavy with algorithm updates in October, November. So like October spam update hits, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, strong domain, strong brand, but like now I've just lost a ton of search traffic and impressions. Why? Well, it's probably because your content was carrying you for a little while, but now there's been some fingerprinting happened, and what was ranking, what was getting clicks, was getting revenue is now just a pain point for you. You have to clean that up. So yeah, I do think strong domain can kind of mask that whole outcome. Strong brand can mask that. I would say that there is no brand that is large enough, very few brands that are large enough that they can avoid, overdoing sort of spam. We've seen that repeatedly where, big brands and domains in certain categories have been hit by spam updates. Zillow, not too far back, there's been a couple of big like finance publications that have been hit pretty badly, tech blogs, where they, again, a lot of it's just like, oh, we were coasting along and everything looked lovely and everybody needs to know us. Like that, you can't possibly, not have us online, right? Google and Google's like, whatever, like bye. And a lot of that content can be jettisoned pretty quickly. So just be careful there.
Yeah, and we've had a few different, the questions that came in were mentioning like retailers as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
What is this? It's tough, the amount that they have. What does this look like? Any suggestions like for an e-commerce
Yeah.
company? It doesn't have to be a retailer per se, but I just was thinking number of SKUs and all that other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's we run into this a lot. We work with a lot of because of the nature of SEO we do. We work with larger page counts, perhaps than most. You have collections, you have filters that now produce more static URLs than ever before because of the increasing capability of our search platforms. You have variant URLs. If you're on Shopify, those sometimes get forced on you. So there's just all sorts of ways where like you have you have problematic in terms of number of URLs that you have, but you're also problematic because you need to produce content for all of these things. And so if you use AI to produce unique descriptions or rewrite manufacturer descriptions which aren't unique, and you do it at scale, again, you're potentially introducing this risk where first risk is the content actually isn't any really valuable at all for SEO. And secondly, that it potentially becomes a negative for you. And so I would start to think about, again, how to break up your requests for that content into sort of smaller chunks. How do you prominently feature human elements in that content? One of the things we've seen with LLMs is that they really don't index much of the page. Google, again, is a little bit of a different story. So think about like what's most prominent and high on the page, or earliest in the code, as being kind of a key piece of place where you want to have some of that human content available. And that's really, really helpful. I think like think about how you can use scale like 50,000 SKUs. Like if someone can write one question or one line of sentence, or you can create one data point for those products as they sell, that's unique to you, and then you can actually just include in human language without necessarily as part of a bigger AI write-up, you're probably going to have some success that way. The other piece I would also think about, maybe just as a caveat, technically how important are these pages for SEO? Like some of the times when you're trying to produce content for all 50,000 product pages and you're using AI to do that, you're really looking for like, I want my paid ads to do well for this. Maybe it's not the organic piece that's actually important. In which case, maybe consider whether there's some technical approaches to essentially say, Google, don't consider these for organic, but I'm going to run the ads towards them. There may be some solutions like that. We see that a lot with some of our large retailer clients where we carve out some things just for paid. And maybe we're a little more aggressive with AI use on those. We've seen that to help avoid sort of the penalty or devaluing that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, so probably have 4 minutes left here. Everybody, if you have questions, drop in the Q&A. Are you doing an audit? So when you engage with a brand, are you doing an audit, and what does that look like now different than it did a year ago? Like, what do people need to be looking for? Because right now you can, because of these tools, you can put out unlimited content, unlimited. But whether or not it's working or not is another story. But I'd love to know, like, number one, I would encourage everybody to reach out to Jordan, the team at Coalition. They're the leaders in the space. They're hands-on. They're actual humans, not just tech, doing awesome things for a ton of brands in it. But when you engage with a brand, what does it look like? And do you do audits like all the time? Like you have to be audit all the time.
Yeah, one of the things that helps us, I think, retain our clients better than a typical SEO is this effort to surface problems before we actually commit to doing anything for you. It's sort of like going to the doctor, and then like the doctor takes your money and then starts to perform a surgery, and then figures out what's wrong as they're doing the surgery. Like that's the worst kind of surgery you can get. Like I know biopsies and exploratory surgery do happen, but usually there's a lot of prep work that goes in. They interview you, they take your blood work, they do all these things. And that's sort of what our audits are like. We really want to understand what's happening. Some of that is an interview. We want to talk to you about like how you're producing content historically, currently. Are you confident it wasn't, no AI was used? If you're using third-party content creators, we want to kind of double check that. We want to talk about what data sources you have that add unique original value. Is that something that we can start to lean on? Certainly there's a technical audit. We want to get into Google Search Console. Bing Webmaster Tools is also really helpful now with some AI discovery. We may actually want to set up some AI reporting tools just to help you see what we see. We also want to value AI rightly. For a lot of industries, AI is still just a small percentage of the overall opportunity. And so maybe focusing on traditional Google and AI overviews is more important. So we kind of want to help set all those expectations. And we'll cover everything from the actual content and copy to the imagery to the structure of the site to technical factors, platforms, plugins that you're using, just kind of a little bit of a broader gamut, just so we can kind of say, like, here's the lay of the land. Here's what we think it needs to be successful for you today. And at that point, it's a little bit more of a take it or leave it for us. We don't try to chase everybody.
No, I love it. Key takeaways as we wrap up here. Jordan, I think we actually probably have to have a podcast on this. I feel like there's 15 more questions that we have to kind of button up before we find out there's another 40 and we do another webinar. But would love to do a podcast and wrap up the rest of this. But kind of key takeaways as we get to the end here.
If a particular page or series of pages are really important for you to rank with commercially, I would really look at humanizing those more and more and more and continue to sort of add to that. If you have a practice of using AI content, you feel like AI content is really important for you to market your site, market your business, think about how to break that content up into smaller sections. Think about how to do that human insertion practice that we talked about. Think about how you can drive original value into your prompts. and then really make sure that the AI is coming back with something of original value. And then do stay up on like what our AI tells, because again, sometimes I think, again, Google is not going to care even if you build a lot of original value in to your prompt and the underlying data for your prompt. At some point, again, if you're just not cautious about some basic patterns, you potentially run afoul of the devaluing piece or potentially even a penalty. So those would be my key takeaways, I think.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Jordan, thanks for your time today.